Hey y'all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Epomaker Carbon60. This is a 60% compact, low-profile, slim mechanical keyboard that's also the flagship brother to the HE68 that we also reviewed recently. If you guys recall, that keyboard looks something like this, which I really liked because of the super clean design, along with a pretty satisfactory typing experience using the magnetic switches. The Carbon60 though is 2 times the price, namely because of the frame is now built completely out of carbon fiber instead of polycarbonate plastic. And so despite being incredibly light at only 0.5 kilograms, it still is extremely sturdy, withstanding extreme weather conditions, being puncture-proof, corrosion-proof even compared to metal materials like steel, which is why it's kind of a luxurious material often used in sports cars, with a long lifespan as well, which is why using this material has of course increased the cost of this model versus the more affordable HE68, but it still has similar DNA in the form of this lanyard loop or strap on the side that I also do like. I think it gives it a bit more of character, and if you don't like it, you can also remove the strap just by using these 2 screws. Also, despite the extremely slim profile, this one is packing a built-in battery. It can be used as a wireless keyboard in addition to wired, which the HE68 was only available in, making the Carbon60 more versatile because it's wired and wireless compatible. That being said, to achieve this 60-key layout, of course, you are missing a few more function controls and commands, even compared to the 65% one here. For instance, there was another row for insert, delete, page up and down, which are no longer present on the Carbon60, not to mention a dedicated numpad. You won't find that here, and you have to play kind of peekaboo with some of the function keys that are duplicated across certain keys. So whether that's a deal breaker or not depends on how commonly you're using some of those function commands, but if you're primarily typing and just want a super minimalistic looking keyboard in terms of the design, then that's where this one might shine a bit. However, it's also foregoing the arrow keys here on the bottom right hand corner, which might be a more serious offense for gamers, for example, to hit that ridiculously slim and small dimensions that they're going after here. As far as some of the other packaging contents and accessories, aside from the keyboard itself, you'll find access to additional keycaps inside that you can pull off. If you don't like the accent keys, which are in blue here, you can swap them for an all black layout instead. There's also going to be a few spare keycaps in addition to the nano receiver if you're using it in the wireless 2.4G mode. It looks like they're using red switches here by default, but it is hot swappable if you want to replace it with other switches in the future. Plus a USB Type-C to full-size Type-A cable is also included for charging, as well as if you're using it in the wired mode. Also, a quick snapshot of their product page. They are describing this as low-profile, double-shot keycaps, enjoyable for long typing sessions. However, again, it's not necessarily a gaming keyboard in this sense because of the more condensed layout, and aside from the 2.4G receiver, you can also use it in the Bluetooth profile, connecting it again to smartphones like Android, iOS, iPads, using the 3000 mAh capacity battery inside, which can last for around 24 hours with the backlight on versus over 176 hours of use with the backlight off. Now, in terms of the included red switches here, again, they are going to be linear switches, so relatively quiet, and you can see the activation force here. However, that's another point of difference versus the HE68. Instead, opted for magnetic switches, which can be a little bit easier to customize aspects like the activation point using the software, versus on traditional switches like these, it's going to be fixed in place. Regardless, a closer look at this keyboard, I do like the keycaps, which have been slightly textured to be a bit more coarse, edges here also being rounded off with a slight dimple, making it easier to press down on without feeling quite as slippery. It's actually a pretty nice overall texture to the matte finish. On the very back here, we have just some soft touch rubber feet, and that is it. So it's also missing kickstands to further elevate the angle at a slight tilt for added ergonomics. Unfortunately, compared to the HE68, did have that functionality. So that is one aspect that I do wish was present here, but alas, we don't see it. Still, pulling off one of these keycaps, you can see this is what it looks like underneath with the red switches and the aforementioned carbon fiber finish continuing. So the build quality for the materials being quite premium continues to be the main point of difference on this particular keyboard, I would say. And now a quick typing sound test next. So it's a pretty quiet keyboard, barely produces any sound thanks to the dampening and the linear red switches. So if you're using this in a shared office space, it shouldn't be that distracting to others around you, which is nice. The keys also feel very consistent across all of the letters, including the spacebar feels well stabilized. Nothing feels too loose or has a radically different sound compared to the other letters and keys. Since these core 61 keys are still full-sized, it's just you're missing some of the additional function controls that you might see in larger keyboards. And despite the low-profile design, it's still going to be more clicky compared to a traditional chiclet or island membrane-style keyboard that you might have on a laptop. Surprisingly, still pretty thoughtful and crisp in terms of the typing experience. Now, turning it on, when it comes to the Bluetooth mode, you can connect up to 3 devices simultaneously by tapping on the function and then Q, W, and E keys to switch between the 3 devices. Once successful, we can also gauge the battery percentage remaining in the keyboard as well. And as shown here, the overall responsiveness is actually not bad thanks to Bluetooth 5.0. Again, if you're primarily using this for document work or writing emails, it shouldn't have too much lag or delay. It still seems to work well enough, as you can see here. So overall, not bad in terms of general responsiveness in the Bluetooth mode, even though I do wish they somehow could have made space for the arrow keys. It would have been even better. Sometimes if you're trying to move the cursor point around, even for productivity, it would be still nice to see. Oh well, maybe something in the next gen revision. Now when it comes to the backlights, again, similar to the HE68, the lights don't fully shine through the keycaps because they are double layered and slightly more wear resistant. Benefit here is the keys will hopefully not get oily or shiny as you're using it. It's not going to wear down as quickly, but the downside is, again, if you are in a completely dark space or environment, it might be a little bit harder to make out if you aren't a touch typist. So this is what it will look like. But if there's a bit of ambient lighting around, it still looks reasonable, I would say. As for lighting effects, because there are no arrow keys, it also uses a slightly different combination compared to other conventional keyboards we've seen. For example, now the quote key can be used to increase the brightness of the keyboard, versus the colon key can be used for decreasing the brightness until it turns completely off. Similarly, the greater than icon can be used to change the speed of the animation to be faster. As you can tell there, rippling across versus slower, and you can make it gradually pause down onto a single frame. So for speed and brightness, you're using these keys instead. As for changing through other lighting patterns though, it's still quite similar. Using the function and backslash key, we're able to cycle through other animations like this soft gradient effect that looks quite beautiful. And the next one here is going to be cycling through the middle and then converging into a single point on the inside of the keyboard there. The next one here is going to be kind of a candy colored look, going into a rainbow effect that will change a single color at a time across the entire keyboard, also is looking quite good. And this one here kind of reminds me of a flame pattern with reds and oranges slowly dancing across the keyboard. This one here is slightly more reactive, rippling across the entire keyboard in a more random way. And next one here is going to be a memory one, which will splinter across the entire row as well as the column, which is also pretty cool, I have to say. As you are typing very quickly, you can see how that will change accordingly. Next one here goes into another reactive mode, but this one will disappear after a couple of seconds of typing on each individual key. And tapping on the Enter key allows us to change the specific color, for example, turning it to a single green, blue, yellow, purple, so on and so forth instead. However, it looks like you don't have a preset here for white light, which is a little curious. The closest you get maybe would be a bluish. So I hope they can add a white color default into the software maybe down the line, but it is what it is. Here's one more reactive mode that will splinter across a slightly larger section as you're pressing down on an individual key. As you can tell there, instead of only the single key, there's kind of a shadow or halo effect as you're typing very quickly, also looking pretty cool, although these reactive modes might not be as practical as a always-on lighting mode. If you are trying to type in the dark, it might be more of a cool showpiece or a mood lighting mode more than anything. Here's another example which splinters across the entire keyboard after you press on it. Here's a breathing mode that slowly fades in and out, that you can also change the speed, once again into a slightly more unique white with a red stripe. Here's one which is in this dynamic loop that is spinning round and round, kind of like a fan, before cycling into the original rainbow gradient that we saw there towards the beginning. So not bad in terms of customizable lighting effects, all looking quite good, offering pretty consistent lighting overall across all of the edges and corners as you are looking down at it. Now, because this model isn't advertised as a gaming keyboard, maybe it matters a little less since it is missing again the arrow key. However, in the wired mode, the fastest responsiveness that you can achieve is 1000 Hz for the polling rate, which is matched using the 2.4G receiver as well. But with Bluetooth, it will reduce to 125 Hz for the polling rate instead. That is one more point of difference compared to the HE68 and other gaming-centric models, which have a even more impressive 8000 Hz at this point in time. But again, if you're just using this for simple document work and typing out essays, it already feels responsive without dropping any keys or letters even when typing very quickly in my testing. Now, when it comes to the driver support situation, if you're just using this for typing, honestly, it's a universal keyboard that connects with any system, regardless of if it's a mobile operating system or Windows, Mac, Linux. But if you wanted to further customize some of the macro commands and lighting effects, there is an optional software available for desktop computers like Windows and Mac. Interestingly, you have to first download a software from GitHub compatible with VIA. Afterwards, you can download a JSON file from their website, and you're supposed to then load that file into the downloaded software for it to then recognize the keyboard when you plug it in, allowing you to assign and remap controls based on your preferences. I guess one benefit here is because they are using VIA, the driver support isn't going to be as locked down. It feels a bit more open source in that way. The downside, though, is I'm not a huge fan of how for every single keyboard, it seems like Epomaker has a different way of making the drivers compatible with your computer. For example, the HE68 required you to download their software directly from their website, and for other keyboards that they've released, you have to download a separate software every single time. It is just a little bit frustrating because if you have many of their keyboards, there isn't really a universal piece of software that just works plug and play, but instead you have to download something different every single time. And I feel like that's a little bit redundant. For example, a simplified web app version might be nice to consider so that you don't have to install anything on your computer and you can still control some of the basic features. So anyways, that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of this Epomaker Carbon60 mechanical keyboard. And the design as well as build materials here are definitely the main selling point. It's astonishingly thin and lightweight, also offering a pretty good general typing experience. However, there are a couple of compromises to achieve the super slim build, including the omission of arrow keys, which makes it more of a productivity-centric model instead of being a gaming keyboard. But ultimately, if you like the way this looks, the typing experience is good if you're using it, again, mostly for document work or emails. It is definitely one of the more striking keyboards I've come across in recent memory. So you can check out more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the rather interesting Epomaker Carbon60 Ultra Slim Mechanical Keyboard.